Welcome to Poemalogues. My name is Dasha Kelly Hamilton. I'm going to be your host. I'm the Poet Laureate for the city of Milwaukee and for the state of Wisconsin. Poemalogues is my way to basically fall into conversations with people. I miss people. Don't you miss people? I miss people. So it's a chance to fall into conversation with some new faces, some familiar faces, and in some cases, there are names that have just been in my inbox or in my contact list, and sometimes just floating in the back of my mind, names I haven't connected with in a long time, names that I'm familiar with and don't know the person. So Poemalogue is a chance to pull all of that together and fall into the log, the dialogue. And yes, we use poems as a way to get there, but don't worry. This is not a show about poems. It's a show about people and their journey and their stories. And I wonder about people and their journeys. And today we're talking about wonder. So one of the things that I was looking into when I thought about this today, the poem that I'll share at the end is how you can be so clear and something is so familiar and you know it pretty well, and you learn one new fact or you hear one fresh story, and it sets off this wonder about this thing that used to be so familiar. So I'll share that poem at the end, but first and very much foremost, we are going to invite Dr. Sylvia Wilson to the screen to talk about wonder. How are you today?
I'm doing well. Thank you for inviting me. I'm excited about today.
Absolutely. I appreciate you making the time for it. So we are having this discussion about wonder, and it's one of those words that can feel enormous and impossible and tiny and essential all in the same breath sometimes. So to have the chance to fall into this could be whimsical conversation with someone who I find to be a thought partner, this is going to be good. This is going to
I
be
hope
good.
so.
But before we get started, I would love for you to start off by give us an idea of who you are, where you're from, what you're about,
Oh,
what is your
wow.
whole life story?
My whole life story.
Mhm.
So born and raised in Milwaukee, grew up around the areas of 35th and Galena and 48th and Locust in Milwaukee. Um, in a pretty kind of dysfunctional family. And so really from an early age, I'm the oldest of two. And then later on in life, my mom adopted a little boy. So I have a younger sister and a younger brother. But just growing up in the household that we were in, dealing with, the ups and downs of poverty, the ups and downs of, some dysfunction that was coming from my mom's and stepdad's background. Um, just really dug into the books. So dug into the books, saw that as my way out. Went to Marquette University, went to and got a degree in English literature. Went to UWM and studied for my master's administrative leadership for adult and continuing education. Got my PhD in urban ed and psychology, and just really searching for a way to serve the community, serve the folks that come from similar backgrounds to what I came from. Got married in my mid-20s, have 4 sons with my husband. We started off in youth ministry doing that together, later branched out and started our own business, MK Grind, working with young people in entrepreneurship. And that actually was an introduction to Teens Grow Greens, an organization that I am currently, excuse me, program director at. So yeah, I mean, that's kind of the 2-minute spiel. I don't know if that was 2 minutes.
Ding, you did it. You did it. 4 boys. Oh,
4 sons, yes. Yeah, I
um, what? So reaching for the English language right now. So I come
mhm,
from a family full of women.
mhm.
So in coming up, we had a male at each generation. I had one uncle, one male cousin who was actually like 10, 15 years younger, so he didn't really count. He didn't hang out with us.
Yeah, get that.
My father was in the mix, so as the he was the son in he was one son, he's my father, but so the son-in-law, and just how my grandmother doted on him. So just I had a different experience, right?
Yeah.
And my cousin had a son. She had a daughter first, and she had a son. And she was like, when she grew up, she was the junior mama, right?
Mm-hmm.
So she figured, yeah, kids, piece of cake. Babies, I know babies. And she said, Dasha, these little boy creatures, different. They're for real. They're different. She said they're babies, but it's not the same.
Yeah.
And she knew it wouldn't be the same, but just how much it's not the same. So my husband is different, exact opposite, just men, boys all around. So I marvel at that. So he has a son, and I'm just like, this is what 9-year-olds do, huh? Okay. All right. So it's a different world. So just imagine. So one, they say that you will always be protected and taken care of, and your grasses will always be mowed. But or is it queenly in a house full of boys and men, or is it warden-y?
I don't like to use the word warden. It's definitely pulls out all the nurturing, I think. Oh my goodness, I've had to learn so much. So, I wanted boys when I got married. That's what I prayed for, actually. I prayed for 3. So our 4th, who is actually 6 years younger than the youngest of our oldest 3, we call him our bonus boy. He's the bonus boy. So to have 4 is like, whoa. When I grew up, though, I'm the oldest from my mother. My mother is the oldest in her generation, and then my grandmother is the oldest in her generation. So my mother's mother. But under me there's a good number of boys, and so around my age there were boy cousins, and so that's who I hung out with. They were kind of like siblings to me, and my sister came 6 years under me. So again, there were right. So I grew up around the masculine. The masculinity, even at some point in life, was like, I wish I was a boy. But anyway.
She came back.
But yeah, I find that you can't really categorize. Like, I know people say men are like this and women are like this. Like with them, there's so many nuances to their characters and who they are. They are so individual in both the blessings and the beauty that you see in their characters, as well as the challenges. And so what I find is that it's this constant growing and learning experience, because the nurturing can't be the same for all of them. The way you love on them can't be the same for all of them. The way you deal with challenges can't be the same for all of them. So I don't know. I just feel like people have said like mama bear. I think even when I work with young people have asked teenagers that I work with, well, how would you describe Sylvia? It's like mama, because I just, I think it's part of my character, but I also feel like that's part of what I have had to do, is kind of find the uniqueness in people and try to cater to their uniqueness and nurture them in the way that they need it most.
That's interesting language. And you will indulge me in landing on your word choice, since you are intentional with your language and a literary scholar and all of that. You will not be put upon this way, but you had to. So that's an interesting choice of language. Why do you say you have to be that?
Oh my goodness. I feel that's part of who I am. And that's an interesting thing that you even pull that out. I feel like it's a part of who I am, and part of my purpose is to be a nurturer and to be an extension of love, which, when I first agreed to come into this conversation, I was looking at legacy. And that was actually one of the things that I wanted to reflect on, and it made me reflect on, is how has love been displayed before me, just especially the women in my family, that I feel like through relationships and with their own children have sacrificed so much to consistently love and try to nurture, and then through so many trials. and failures and all kinds of things. And one of the things that I picked up on was what I think I've learned about love from watching them is that it's sacrificial. Um, and in reflecting on that,
Hmm.
I have to say it caused some tension because part of me is saying, well, yes, love is sacrificial. Yes, sometimes you have to give, extra of yourself. But the other part of that is, should it always be? Because I feel like some of the women in my family have given, when you talk about sacrifice being that a part or something has to die, I've seen
Mhm.
that
Mhm.
happen to such an extent that it's been harmful. Um, and so then that made me kind of like battle inwardly, like, that's not the legacy I want to leave, right? I want to love, I want to nurture. I feel like that's part of who I am. But how do I learn how to love and nurture in a way that I don't have to kill off part of me in order to pour into others? And so that's kind of been,
Wow.
I would say, the challenge. Yeah. And the constant reflection.
And I was gonna, and constant being a key word. So it is, yes, the even beyond what you're told. So much
Hmm.
of what we absorb and we move into is what we've seen, the dots that we may have connected incorrectly, but you
Mm.
had the dots were given to you, however you may have put
Yep.
them together wrong. But
Yes.
but regardless of how you got it, to walk away or go into the world feeling the labor of love, and not the
Hmm.
labor and the love of love, the
Hmm.
obligation of what
Yes.
it means to be the center of a relationship or a family, or and it is a pouring, right? Eh, so it's a pouring into, and is it about, at this point, because we're breaking cycles, we're going to do this better and different, we're,
Hmm.
women are not going to stop loving that way. Black women are not going to stop loving that way. Black women with your back. So the list keeps on. You're not getting away for
Yeah.
this,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? So,
Yeah.
but how do we? Is it boundaries? Is it choosing who gets that love? Is
Mm.
it, or none of those habits changed except pouring it? I don't know. What is, what have you, where have you landed? So I'm sure it's not about not loving that hard, but
Yeah.
where have
Yeah.
you landed on
Absolutely.
making that not also be something that consumes you?
Absolutely. And I think part of it is boundaries. I think part of it is deciding to whom and when. Um, but I think the biggest part of it for me is learning to love me first. Um, Making sure,
Like
ensuring
first,
that I'm
first, like first, first.
first, first, like first. I know, right? Like, um, setting the boundaries where I have to spend time with me. I have to spend time loving on me. I have to spend time nurturing me. However that looks like, on
Mhm.
some days it may look like reading a book and just really kind of getting, fed in the spiritual fuzzies for myself. As other days it may just look like taking an extra long shower and,
Mm.
leaving the conditioner in my hair a little bit longer and painting my toenails over, even though I could wait a little bit longer. But, um, sometimes it's just sitting in silence and being away. Um, Sometimes, like I said, it is, I can help you right now. I could help you right now. Um, but I feel like there's a pull that's saying, not right now, or no, I'm going to let someone else do this. I think it's also
Mhm.
making a shift from a mindset of scarcity into a mindset of abundance. Like, I don't have time. I don't have time for this. I don't have time to exercise. I don't have time to make that smoothie. I don't have time, you know, um, I don't have time to take that extra long shower. I say, no, I'm going to make time. And what I need to get done will get done. And also when it comes to people, that part that you said about deciding who,
Mm.
I have 5 folks that I'm really intensely, helping right now, and someone else comes along. And I think sometimes we feel like an obligation because we see a connection with that person. We're like, I definitely could help. I think I could help this person. Um, when I'm saying a shift to a mindset of abundance, it's not saying you're only one person, and not feeling like if I don't help them, especially if it's not an absolutely dire situation, like if I don't help them, then nobody else will. No one can help them the way I can help them, right? Trusting God, trusting, the spirit of God, that if I say no because it's just pulling too much on me and it'll actually strain me, um, too much, then if I say no, someone else will rise up and say, that's okay, I can help them. Right.
Mm.
And you may not know who that person is, but trusting that it will happen for them.
Yeah, you said again, going back to this word choice, this could be the
Mm.
key
Mm.
that I'm taking away, where it's you
Yeah.
say, I can, I could. Both of
Mhm.
them affirm that it's possible. One of
Right.
them gives you permission to not have to. And so, as a nurturer, as a leader, you were the oldest. I'm an oldest too.
Mm.
Uh, and you're accomplished, and you just get into a place where it becomes part of your muscle memory to do. And we're
Yes.
called to serve, and an action, there's a verb at the end of that, right? But
Mhm.
I could says you also don't have to.
Right.
I remember having a conversation with someone years ago, and I was just out of sorts about this project that wasn't going anywhere. It was going to take a lot of time and a lot of money and a lot of my energy, but it was so dope and it had to happen. And he was like, "Hey, what are you doing? You've had all
Mm.
these signs to walk away from this. And this is not." I was like, "But it's such a great idea." He said, "Okay, every great idea doesn't have to happen."
Mm. Yeah. Yeah.
It was a revelatory moment. It was a revelatory moment. Like, but I
Absolutely.
but I can. So I don't. Are you? Hmm. And I've
Mm.
never forgotten that. I was mad in the
Yeah.
first heartbeat, but then it
Right.
just kind of
Right.
melted and it made sense. So to say I could as opposed to I've got to. I
Right.
don't want to necessarily generalize, some of it is, as a Black woman, but as a woman, as a mom, but it's a person, right?
Mhm.
I know me personally, I'm really working to, I have this visual of these hooks, like
Mm.
a boat sail. I don't think
Mhm.
sails are made that way, but just roll with it,
Okay.
right?
Okay.
But unhooking, like from this huge tarp. So, unhooking from things like gotta, unhooking from
Mhm.
the idea of not having time. You have to
Mhm.
make it,
Mhm.
unhooking from these habits of thought that keep you inside the same boundaries when it's time to
Yeah.
refresh them. So I
Yeah.
love that. So I'm taking that with me. Could and can will
Awesome.
change the whole show.
Yes.
Change the whole show.
Yes. Absolutely.
So
Awesome.
I want to, before we go into this poem, I have two more questions I want to ask you. So one, I
Yeah.
want to backtrack to you in this love of language and literature and books and reading. When you set out did you go into the teaching mode so you can be around books all the time, or
No.
did you want to teach? Was it about educate? Was it more literature? Was it just this
So
love of language and
just
story? Tell me what's the core.
yeah. I think I fell in love with language and story in 8th grade in middle school. I've always been a writer. And so I've always expressed myself, I feel like, best in writing. Um, and it's really interesting because my mother named me Sylvia. My middle name is Nicole. I found out later in life that my dad is actually the one that named me Nicole. He said, I want her middle name to be Nicole because I want to call her Nikki because I love Nikki Giovanni. And I was like, oh my goodness. So I've always loved writing. And actually, I went into my undergrad as an accounting and finance major because I wanted to go to law school because I thought that would make me a lot of money. But then in my sophomore year, I realized that that's not really my passion. It's not where, that's just not where, it's not where my heart is. So I did change to English literature. I've always loved poetry. I've always, again, felt like words were just an extension of emotion and thought and being, for me in a way that I feel like in other ways I couldn't.
Hmm.
Um, there were things I think in my childhood that were often shushed. So my voice was often shushed. Um, you know, you couldn't talk back, right? You couldn't, there's certain things that, we deal with, I think a lot of times as parents, or it's just like you don't speak out. I told you what to do and you do. But I've always been kind of analytical and very reflective. So I've always had a reasoning behind why I say what I say. And so I've always wanted to express that. Like, I understand what you're saying, mama, but the reason why I did it this way was
I'm
because
laughing because we both got the same whooping. Trying to explain
right.
ourselves
Baby,
when you
what are
had
you
been told, I'm
doing?
just trying to be
What
quiet.
are
But
you
let me, no, no.
doing?
If you, if you, if I can explain it to her,
Right. If you
she'll
could
get
just
it. Yeah. So
explain
that's
my
what's making me
thought
laugh. We
process.
got the same
If
whooping.
you could just understand it. I'm just trying to help you get understanding.
And you're like, what,
Um,
7?
right, right. All the way through, my teen years, it was kind of like, shut up and do what I told you to do. Um, And so I found that expression for me was best poured out on a page.
Hmm.
And even sometimes when I would have those conflicts with my mom, I would write her a letter and I'd be like, this is what I was trying to say. You didn't want to hear my voice saying it, so I'm going to write it down and hopefully you can get what I was trying to say. Understanding has always been huge to me. I think,
Hmm.
again, just because for whatever reason, God made me kind of analytical and reflective. And so I've always tried to understand my own thoughts and how I'm thinking and why I'm thinking the way I'm thinking and
Hmm.
what shaped why I think the way that I think about this and all of those sort of things, even at an early age. And so being able to express my understanding of certain things um, on page has always been a passion for me. Loved my English literature major when I went into that at Marquette. Like I said, 8th grade, I had a teacher who introduced us to Shakespeare in 8th grade, and we actually had to write a Shakespearean play. And that was kind of like, ooh, yes.
You're like,
So
"Hmm?"
like I said, fast forward to undergrad, it was like a reconnecting with that love for me. Um, and I've always just really in the same, I think in a similar way that I see you doing, like picked out words that we think that we already know the definitions of and we already know the
Mhm.
understanding of. And it's kind of like we say these words, but what do they really mean? Are there alternative meanings? And if we change the definition or we pick one of those alternative meanings, how does that reshape that whole sentence?
Mhm.
And so yeah, that's just always, I don't know, it's been maybe because he named me Nikki.
Good job, daddy. Good job. Good job. Good job. And
Yeah,
but he lost out to Sylvia. I mean, not that that's a lovely first name, but he had to make a strong case for that middle name, right?
yeah,
So
yeah,
and you're not
absolutely.
named after Sylvia Plath, I presume. So he didn't get a
No.
double poet name. Mm-mm-mm. Somebody has to settle sometimes. We got to compromise. We have to compromise. We have to compromise. Well, listen
Yeah.
to this. I would love to hear how you um this enter this journey of wonder and the poem that you found. And before you
Um,
tell me, is there anything that you are excited about or if
mm,
you have a good word for the people before we get to that?
mm, peace
Hmm.
and acceptance. Um, coming from the background that I came from with all this kind of tumult, it's like high, high, and then low, low, and high, high, and then low, low, just in childhood. And I've always wanted this kind of just steadiness in life. And in everything that I've done, I think that's kind of been like the major um, goal in everything in my education, in my family life, and it's like, can we just get steadiness?
Wow.
And people used to tell me like, Sylvia, you're a perfectionist. And I'm like, no, I'm not. No, I'm not trying to be perfect. I'm not aiming to be perfect. I want things to be good, but I'm not trying to be perfect. But then honestly, just even a couple of months ago, I heard a different definition of what perfectionism is. And they said it's not the constant goal of trying to be perfect. Perfectionism is more the grief and loathing over what is not perfect in your life. And when I heard that, I was like, I am a perfectionist. I am,
The
because I've
grief
spent
and loathing over what is not perfect
not
in your
perfect.
life. That
Yes,
is
yeah.
double layers of a lot of energy. Grief and loathing.
And I
What
have
you
felt that. That has been like a shadow over me for so many years, because no matter what I feel like I've put my best efforts into, I feel like in life, nothing has really given me the rewards of those best efforts in the way that I thought that it should have. So even with schooling, I told you I put my head in the books and I was like, school, school, school,
Mhm.
and I got done with my PhD. I couldn't find a job for, a year and a half. I tried to apply to become a professor in a number of different universities all over the country. And they're going, oh, where's your formal teaching experience? And I said, well, I have community teaching experience. I have not been in a college classroom teaching. That doesn't count. So we love your research. We love your vision for, teaching. We love all of those things, but you don't have the teaching experience. It's crazy. So even in, having children, right? We have all these big grand visions of what our children are going to be. Like I said, I wanted 3 boys. I knew that before I got married, and the Lord blessed us with 4. And like our oldest 2 are on the autism spectrum,
Mm.
and so it's dealing with that, like, and not understanding autism and not understanding like how is it, what causes what,
Mhm.
which no one fully understands. But then really kind of taking that burden, like, is there's something that I did that was wrong, or is there something that, what's going on? And then having to redevelop my expectations for my children, and for what life would look like as a parent in parenting these children. Um, how does that reshape
Mm.
your marriage and the way you relate to one another in marriage? Um, all of these things, my career, like if someone would have told me 10 years ago, oh, Sylvia, you would be working in, an organization that teaches urban ag to kids, and you're looked at kind of as an environmental leader in the community. I'm like, yeah, right. That ain't what
That's
ain't
funny. You're
nobody
cute.
talking about no trees. Ain't nobody talking about no trees.
You ain't never heard me talk about trees.
Right. But here I am, right? So just learning to be at peace with
Mhm.
where I am, that even though I put forth effort, and I may even put forth my best effort, understanding that life is what it is, sometimes you cannot avoid those high highs and those low lows. And to be at peace with where you are, to embrace and accept who you are, that you're on this continuum in this journey. I can't continue to loathe about a decision that I made, 20 years ago that I wish I would have made better. And like I have, hindsight, right? It's 2020. Like I understand now, like, girl, what was you thinking? What were you thinking? But I can't keep looking at those decisions, because I only could be who I was at the moment, in that moment. And I could only make the decisions that I made. And although I
Mm.
understand that better now, that there may have been other options that I just didn't understand, I can't continue to loathe that. I have to I have to embrace that. What did I learn? What have I learned? Um, where am I now? How do I embrace where I am now? And how do I embrace the not only the growth, but the growing, right? That I'm not even fully
You're
where I
not
want to
done.
be, not done. And so I still may be making some mistakes that 10 years from now I'll look back and go, Sylvia, for
What was you
real,
thinking?
what were
Really?
you thinking? Right. And being okay with that. And for a long time in my life, I've not been okay with that. I've not been okay with looking back and looking at mistakes, looking back and seeing things that didn't go as smoothly as I wish they would
Mhm.
have. The
And that makes
imperfections.
sense.
Yeah.
I was like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. You know, with you being a self starter, a bookworm, as it were, an overachiever, all of those pieces, and we're conditioned to check the next box and hit the next level
Yeah.
and do the next thing, and not even about glory and fame per se, but that's what you're supposed to do. That's what happens next. That's how.
Right.
And so going back to that detachable boat sail.
Yes.
Unhooking from those conditionings, those trainings, so you
Mhm.
can you still ask yourself all the questions, you still look backwards, but it's with a different, I guess, a different muscle, and
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
absolutely a gift. That's
Yes.
absolutely a gift. So I'm glad that you gave that to yourself.
Thank you. I'm
So give us
learning.
this
I'm
poem.
learning.
Tell me how you found this poem.
So after thinking about, legacy and thinking about my sons, and I was pulling up stuff that was about, parents on their deathbeds and what message they would give to their children. I was like, it's not
That's
really what
not
I'm
what
looking
I'm feeling
for.
today.
But then I started to really think about, like, what does legacy mean to me, and what do I want to pass on to my kids? And that understanding, like I just said, of peace and acceptance is really what I want them to embrace and to understand early in life, so that maybe they can avoid some of that grief, right? Of looking back and going, oh no. And so then I really started to think about, this idea of life being wonderful and
Hmm.
embracing the wonder of life. You may not understand everything that's coming. You may not even understand everything that's happened, but you're in this place. And to stay in a mindset of wonder and learning and embracing as you go is really, and in peace and acceptance. That's what I really want them to have. And also embracing, I think that when I think about kids who have neurodiversities. So I have two sons who are on the autism spectrum. Um, they, a lot of times, at least from what I've seen, embrace this sense of wonder in a way that many of us who are considered neurotypical cannot and do not. Like, I've
Hmm.
watched my son, my oldest, walk into a room and literally just scan the entire, I mean, from the corners to the ceiling, the creases in the ceiling to the carpet to everything. And he's observing, and he'll tell you about things in a room that you're like, I didn't see that. Where was that at? And or he's drawn to things in a room that most people would just ignore.
Hmm.
He used to have speech therapy, and he would be in this room, and the woman used to keep, there was this puzzle that he loved, and she would keep hiding it. And as he would move into a room, somehow intuitively she would hide it because she wants to get through this testing first, right? She wants to get through the activities that she
I see.
planned.
I
We can do
see.
that later. And so she was like, we got to get through this first. So I'm going to have to hide this from him because otherwise he'll go straight for it. But he would come in, and somehow intuitively he would always know where she hid it. And so he would sit for a few minutes, and he'd be like, yeah. And then when he got tired, he would just go straight to it, and she could have it in the back of a shelf under something, and he would just kind of know and
Wow.
somehow intuitively observe that it was there. And how does he always know that it's there? So embracing that wonder, um, is what kind of, so I typed in wonder and I typed in autism,
Mm.
just to see what would come up. And what actually
Okay.
came up was a poem by Benjamin Giraud, who at the time that this was written was a 10-year-old, with Asperger's, which is a highly functioning, autism. And the poem is called I Am. And from my understanding, he was given kind of the prompt, the first two words of each of the sentences, and he completed them. And this really resonated with me. So I don't know if you want me to read it or.
Yes, please.
Okay. So here we go. I am odd. I am new. I wonder if you are too. I hear voices in the air. I see you don't, and that's not fair. I want to not feel blue. I am odd. I am new. I pretend that you are too. I feel like a boy in outer space. I touch the stars and feel out of place. I worry what others might think. I cry when people laugh. It makes me shrink. I am odd. I am new. I understand now that so are you. I say, I feel like a castaway. I dream of a day that's okay. I try to fit in. I hope that someday I do. I am odd. I am new. Um, and when I first read that, even though it's from the perspective of this 10-year-old boy at the time on the autism spectrum, it resonated with me so much because I think when we're going back and talking about that grief of the past and not being able to accept how things have gone, that I have often found myself feeling odd and out of place, um, and kind of drifting and just not quote unquote normal, if
Hmm.
you will.
Hmm.
And so even though I read it and it was just like, oh, this is a young man who's on the autism spectrum, who is, dealing with his differences, being amongst other people. Um, it was so much, I feel like, me as well. So um, it's beautiful. I feel like
Hmm.
that is I'm embracing that is my life. My life is odd.
Your
It
lovely
is
odd life.
new. Yes.
We all
You
have one,
know,
it turns out.
everything about it, right? And so it's who I am, it's where I am. Um, and I'm learning to embrace it. I'm learning to love it. I'm learning to be present,
Hmm.
um, and take joy in it.
Thank you for this. Thank
Thank
you.
you for the
Thank
opportunity to
you for
share.
this. Yes, our wonderful, little, enormous, odd, normal lives.
Yes.
One and all. One and all.
Absolutely.
Me too.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, thank you, ma'am. I appreciated this exploration of joy. I knew it. I just wasn't not even surprised. Not even surprised. I really enjoyed this conversation. I'm looking forward to more.
I did too. Thank you. I am
You're
too.
welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. So, in this idea of joy, I mentioned that it was, or excuse me, of wonder, thinking about things that are familiar, and then you take the time, much like she describes her son. Sylvia describes her son being able to go into a room because he has a different experience with sensation and find wonder in the things that are there. So I found this poem. I was a full grown up. I will admit, a full grown up when I realized that the fuzzy dandelions are the same as the yellow things, the yellow weeds. I didn't know that. I thought they were two different types of weeds. I was wrong. You learn those things when you have to mow the grass. So, and I recently was watching a program, and I know how a dandelion works and flowers and pollination and whatnot, but to hear the sentence that every seed in a dandelion has all the equipment to start a whole nother field of dandelions, and there's a cycle that blows off, and all the seeds, as we know, I was one of the kids who blew it when I thought it was a special flower. But just that sentence made me go back and just spend time, and I didn't do a whole research about dandelions, but just be reminded of things that I knew and I understood that I didn't know at all. And it was wonderful just to be taken in this idea of how these things work. So I followed my own instructions and put in dandelion poem, and this is what I came up with. So this is a poem by Brooke Higgins. A puff of breath released, let fly like dandelion seeds, thrust upon the world, burrow into succoring soil, take root, drink spring rain, unfurl green tarpaulins, to catch the sun, lift face skyward, exalt, celebrate, worship, bask in the blink of ripeness, let go, sigh and wither, curdle, yellow to burnt umber, whiten a soft nursery, puff, hold for a breath, and let fly. Thank you for being here, and we have been flying with the conversation of joy and wonder and legacy and justice. So today was wonder. What we'll talk about next week. I hope to see you here. Thanks.